Welcome back to Copenhagen Blue. Today we're doing an oil cooler on the wife's car. Her remote start didn't work a couple days ago. It started up and then her car shut off after about 10 seconds or so, and no check engine light or anything, but I pulled the codes and it had one for oil pressure circuit high. I think it was a P0524. I'll have to look it up and I'll put it up on the screen. But I figured, okay, well, I need to replace an oil pressure sensor. If you have a Pentastar 3.6 liter in anything, more than likely you've replaced an oil pressure sensor at some point. But when I looked down at the oil pressure sensor itself to make sure that the connection was good, I noticed a little bit of wetness in the valley between the cylinders, which means that the oil cooler is leaking. It's pretty common on these, and I'm sure there's about 1 million videos. I've never done it. My 200 was under warranty when they took care of it. So this will be my first time doing an oil cooler on a 3.6 Pentastar. Let's get started. Now, I am upgrading to an aluminum one. I've had mixed reviews and heard mixed reviews on this. I don't know if it's the better way to go, but from the factory, this whole assembly, minus the cooler and the cap, is all plastic, and apparently it tends to crack. You know, lots of heat cycles, expansion, contraction causes plastic to get brittle, not to mention the fact that it's constant contact with oil. So I got an aluminum one. This one is off Amazon. It's I think it was $89 or so. But we're gonna throw it on and see how the aluminum one works for us. Now this one does come with a new oil pressure sensor and an oil temp sensor. So it's pretty complete. It also comes with new upper and lower intake manifold gaskets, as well as new bolts. So it's a pretty decent kit, I think, for what you're getting. But let's see how it goes together. Sorry for the heater, by the way. Garage is cold. I don't feel like being cold, so I have the heater running. Hopefully it's not too loud. But first thing we're gonna do is take off our cover and set that to the side. Once you have your cover off, you can actually see here's the housing I'm talking about, and you can see that it's plastic, and if you can look down there, there you go. You can kind of see some of the sheen of wetness. So there's oil down there, and it lost quite a bit. I think in total I lost like a half a quart of oil from that thing going bad. I noticed, I checked the oil, and I just done it like 3,000 miles ago. And I'm like, okay, well, that's kind of odd, but we're gonna start with taking off the intake assembly. So we have the airbox here, and then we have all the intake piping over here that goes over to the throttle body. All right, one of the things we're gonna do first before we start pulling off the intake manifold though, is we are going to drain our coolant. And in this case, way down there you can see there's actually a aluminum pipe and a hose. We're gonna break that free, drain a lot of the coolant. We're gonna take off our upper radiator cap here. Now, never do this when the engine's hot. Always wait till it's cool to the touch. And you'll open it. Sometimes you get a little bit of a hiss, and you get a little steam coming out of there. We wanna be able to have that drain out and not get caught up in a vacuum. But now that we have the coolant drained, I'm gonna start taking everything off. Now, all I've done really is I've taken off the airbox, I've taken off the intake hose, and then there's an air silencer back here. I took off our air temp sensor, and then it pulls away from the throttle body, and it's just held on by a gasket back there. So it's just kind of a snug to fit. Now, one of the things that we need to do is we're gonna have to take off the bolts that hold down the upper intake manifold. Now, on a lot of the cars, there are these 10mm bolts that hook into brackets. I'm sorry, they're actually, well, these are the bolts. The nuts on a lot of them, I think, are missing. A lot of mechanics just kind of bend them back and out of the way. So you can see that one's missing, that one's missing, and then there's two over here that are missing. I need to get new nuts, but not today. I have to break the bolts free in the sequence that you would normally torque them down. So we have 1, 2, 3, let's see, 4, 5, and then 6 and 7. So we're gonna break the bolts free in the order in which they go down, and then that way you're releasing the torque in the same fashion that you apply it. Since my nuts were already gone, all I did was use a screwdriver in here kind of sideways enough to pry this away so that I was able to get the intake manifold to release on the front. And now you can see I'm going to be able to pull it out towards me, and we'll get that upper intake manifold off. Your throttle body that you're going to have to disconnect, there are some safety clips. This one you pull out, and then you push the connector in, like you're locking it. Push it in, squeeze, and then it'll slowly release. But there's this tab here, so we need to pry that off, which will give us the slack for that to disconnect. All right. Now this one here, it looks like it pulls out. Oh, yep, there we go. Okay, so you see how that slid out, and then give it a little wiggle, and there we go. It's out of the way. We'll just kind of tuck that down, and that should give us the room. Minus, apparently there's a hose back here that we missed, and we can pull off our upper intake manifold, and we'll go set it down. Now that we have that upper intake manifold off, this is a great time if you plan on doing any more work on your engine. If you need to do coils or you need to do spark plugs, this is the only time that you have access to these rear coils and spark plugs. So take advantage of this if you can. You have a leaking valve cover back there? Do it now while you have everything apart. You need to do a cam sensor? Go ahead and do it while you have it apart. There's a lot of things that have access right now that you don't normally have. Now, another thing that has access is, unfortunately, anything that goes down these holes is going to have access to your intake valves. These go down into your engine. So if you drop anything down, a nut, a bolt, anything, and it makes it into your cylinder, you're going to have to pull a cylinder head to get it out. So be very careful. What I'd recommend is crumple up some clean paper towel, fill each one of these runners up so that way nothing can go down. Once we take that lower intake manifold off, then we're going to put it in the cylinder heads. We'll put some paper towel just to block everything off as well. Now the next thing that we're going to do before we continue is we're going to unhook all of our fuel injector connectors. To get these red locks off, you just take a screwdriver, and let me see if I can get in here. I need to get some distance so it can focus, and you just kind of pry up. In this case, I'll use a bolt from the housing. This probably really isn't a one thing. There we go, but you saw that just came up a little bit there. Let's try it again over here. We're just going to use the bolt as a little bit of leverage, and there we go. We got that red connector pop up. Now we can squeeze the tab and it'll release. So I really messed up Ron, and I didn't do something in the right order. I can't go and pull the fuse for the fuel pump and go to start the engine because I have the upper intake manifold off, and I don't need to have the valves open while I have paper towel in there and, you know, risk that stuff getting sucked down in there with just the vacuum of the engine. That'd be stupid. So I'm going to take off the fuel supply line here, and I put some paper towel under here. I'm going to push this in, and then there's two green tabs. I'm going to see if I can get this to come off. I'm going to lose some fuel. It's going to come out. It's going to be under a little bit of pressure. Hopefully it's nothing crazy. And it's not. Okay, there we go. Okay, so no big deal. No harm, no foul, no smoking. Now that we have that off, we can undo our bolts. Again, we need to do this in sequence. I'm going to post the sequence on the screen. So let's take care of that right now. Well, that was a special moment. Remember how I said there wasn't a lot of fuel that came out? Well, as soon as I broke the first bolt free, fuel just shot out all over the place. So, word to the wise, be careful. You're gonna get some fuel that's gonna come out of there. I mean, it's all gonna evaporate. It's not the end of the world, but maybe just, you know, keep a little, you know, paper towel there. Just a thought. We have the 8 bolts for our lower intake manifold undone, and let's just see if, and we don't. I screwed up. Let me show you what I screwed up. So 2 of the bolts that I took out are actually for the fuel rail themselves, not for the intake manifold. So I need to put these 2 back down and torque those down properly. The bolts that I actually want are back here. Way to go. And my torque wrench wouldn't go down to 62 inch-pounds, so I just used a small ratchet, and when it touched, I just gave it like another quarter turn, just so it's on there. It's not just snug, it's got a little extra, but this is all plastic. You don't want to start reefing down on this stuff, you'll strip it out. There we go. 1 and 2. Now our intake manifold should lift out. I still have 1 bolt that's kind of in there. We have a little Christmas tree that's hooked in there, a little plastic piece, and there we go. Oh, there we go. Intake manifold lower is out. All right, so now we're down in the nitty-gritty. You can see our oil cooler down here. You can see we have some oil down in the well of the actual V of the engine, and we're looking at our intake valves, which are actually pretty clean. I'm not going to lie. At least I'm not unhappy with that. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to take some paper towel just to be on the safe side. We're going to put that paper towel that we had before right back down into those ports so that we can make sure nothing goes down in our engine that we don't want. We have to take the oil cooler itself out. Now we have our connector for the temp sensor here, which looks like you pull that red tab up. Hey, look, it twists. So we pulled that red tab up just like that. Push in on the connector like you're trying to push it in. Press down on the black tab, and that should release. And then we'll do the same thing with the bottom, but as you can see, the bottom one's facing down, which doesn't make things easy. There's also a coolant pipe that runs to this that we'll have to disconnect. Now that I can get my hands down to get the other sensor, so we might just have to wait till we pull this assembly up to be able to get to the bottom side of it. Somebody has put one in before because those have teeth marks on them from where somebody tightened down the cooler. But let's break this free and see what kind of mess we can make. It looks like a 7mm will fit on there, so just go gently. Alright, broke that one free. And then we go over here to the front side of the motor, break that one free by the oil cooler itself. Obviously somebody put that one on a little bit tight. Not good. That one's kind of spinning. Alright, so I switched up my tactic a little bit and I went from using the 7mm here, and we went down to a 1/4. Let's see if we have a little more bite. Maybe it's just a little small. And I'm going to go to a hand ratchet, a little more control, and we got it to break free. There we go. Alright. There's one more reason why it's important if you get a new kit. Make sure it has the bolts, because now I don't have to worry about, okay, that one head is a little bit stripped out. I'm just good. Hold on to your butts. These seals broke free on one side. Alright, and there's the other. It should just kind of come straight up and out to get this connector off the bottom. So there we go, I got that disconnected. And then we need to disconnect that coolant line right there. We're going to grab our channel locks, grab onto that, move our clamp back on the hose a little bit. Oh, there we go. That came off. That also spilled some oil, down into the intake runner there, but all more reason why it's a good idea to have stuff in your intake runners like paper towel. Looking at this, I don't see anywhere that it's cracked. It looks like it's actually in good shape. I just think all of these O-rings, you can kind of see if you can see them on an angle a little bit, but they've all just flattened out. They've all just worn down. So I don't think this is a cracked one, which is good. Now that we have our oil cooler out, you can see this is where those gaskets go on those little pedestals there. And then we have that one tube that drops down into the actual engine with the O-ring. But we're gonna need to clean all that oil out. I'm going to use a suction device to get a majority of it. You can use a turkey baster, or you can just use a lot of paper towels. We need to get all that cleaned up, as well as we need to clean our surface where our gaskets are going to go for a lower intake manifold when we reassemble everything. I've already started to wipe down this side, and you can see the difference between that and that. Nice and clean. You can see how this looks. Now this side here was full of oil just like that. And I've used my little sucking tool here and sucked all the oil out of there, but it's quite a bit. Besides that, I've just been using blue paper towel and shoving it down in there to suck up the rest of it. So let's clean out the other valley side and get her all cleaned up. Now, if you just watched on the time warp there, I used a little compressed air and I blew out all of the bolt holes where the bolts or the screws are going to go down, just so that there's no liquid down here, because when you try and compress liquid, if you run a bolt in there, it can crack the metal because the liquid has nowhere to go. Metal or liquid doesn't compress like that. So now that that's fairly cleaned out, I mean, I'm pretty happy with how that is. I'm not going to make it perfect. I'm not going to sit there and be able to get every little thing, but I'm going to probably do a little more work here with screwdriver and, you know, little paper towel. Just kind of keep shoving down and trying to clean out those areas. And then we're going to clean up where the intake ports are so we could fit the intake manifold back on after we put the new oil cooler in. On our one connector here for the oil temp sensor. Once that clicks in, take that red lock and push that back down. And then we have our oil pressure sensor. I'm going to put that on until that snaps in, because you're not supposed to lube any of these O-rings or anything. And I want to make sure that everything has a nice mating surface. Looks like everything's cleaned off, so we're good. Dip it down in here. There we go. Get that too. All right, well, that's dropped right in. And we'll put one in each of the appropriate holes. Okay, now we can go through and we have everything cleaned off, all of our surfaces for our intake manifold. I'm going to gently pull out all of our paper towel that we had in there. Now I did have something drop down in one of these cylinders, a little bit of paper towel, cover everything, and alright, so I blew out all the cylinders lightly with some air. Nothing came out really except for maybe one here and one here, and there's little chunks of paper towel. We're going to grab our intake manifold. Let's put those gaskets on and put the intake manifold back on. So we've got our lower intake manifold flipped over. Now what we're looking at here is the bottom of our fuel injectors. You can see those little circles, but we also have our gaskets. You want to use like just a pick tool, something to get in there and under. We just want to pull those out. Take a look, you can see those are not bad. I mean, I don't think I changed those last time. I think I only did the upper intake manifold maybe. Just kind of take a paper towel and you can run it along the inside of that channel where that gasket goes. have all of our new gaskets here. You don't have to use any RTV or anything. Just want to line it up, make sure it looks the same, and then I'm just going to press that right in, and it's just going to sit right inside of there, and that'll seal everything up really, really nicely. You're going to want to do that for all 6 of your gaskets. We have all of our new little gaskets on here for the lower. You just want to push to make sure that those are seated. You don't want them falling out. And I'm going to flip our lower intake manifold back over. We're going to go put it on the engine, and then we'll go put our upper intake manifold gaskets on. I'm going to follow the same sequence, but I'm going to torque them down to that 108 inch-pounds of torque. Any day now. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're also going to go through and we're going to reconnect all of our fuel injector harness wires here. Same thing, I'm going to pull out our gaskets, use a little pick, something to get them out. Now let's get our upper intake manifold and put that on. Just going to clean all this off, make sure we have a nice clean mating surface for our gaskets. Get those in those brackets back there. Make sure we're not pinching anything. We only want 89 inch-pounds of torque, so that's not a lot. Just a seat. There we go. That's it. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And 7. So as you can see, it's not a lot of torque that holds that down, because that's going, those screws are going into that plastic lower intake manifold, so you aren't cranking down on that. Just like that, we have it all back together. Now we're going to throw some coolant in, and then we're going to drain the oil and fill it back up, and then we'll be able to start the engine. Now I know it might seem a little weird. This came with a filter. Thing is, I'm sure it's not a Mopar filter, and I know that seems silly, but your oil filter does matter what you have in your engine. So I wanted to see what I have in here. If it's anything decent. And holy crap, I actually think it is a Mopar filter. At least it's well pleated, and well, I don't like that plastic housing. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pull the other filter out of my old housing, take a look at it, and maybe we're going to throw that in instead. Okay, I don't know if you heard that or not, but if you didn't hear that on camera, holy crapola. I went to take this thing apart, and it's the older style filter that goes in here, and this thing just exploded. Like the spring, everything, something shot across the garage, and this whole assembly just broke apart. So obviously that was another part of the failure, but hey, that filter that came with it I think is going to be just fine. This is actually the new style filter. This is what goes in my 2015 200. So we will just, you know, put that right back in there. That doesn't take a lot of torque either. A lot of people tend to break those because they over torque them. There you go. See, it stopped. Not even putting any more force on it. That's it. All right, so I've filled up the engine with 5.9 quarts of oil. I have my coolant topped up. I lifted up the passenger side of the car, so this is the highest point. We're gonna start the engine. I've gotta wait until the thermostat opens, sucks that coolant in, and then we should be good to go. Now, since this is the first startup, I should have left the engine cover back off, but since it's the first startup, we wanna make sure we don't have any leaks. We're looking at that fuel line that we had there. I don't hear anything. I don't hear any sounds of any fluids. I don't hear any massive vacuum leaks. I can hear our injectors clicking away. Engine runs nice and smooth. Now we're just going to wait for the coolant to drop down. The engine has to go and open up the thermostat, which will suck all the coolant in, and then it'll fill the system and will bleed all the air out of here. All right, well, we got everything put back together. We don't have any fuel leaks, any coolant leaks, any oil leaks. We have heat inside the car. Everything seems to be good. Hopefully those intake manifold gaskets help smooth out the engine a little bit. You know, if you have a vacuum leak, it could cause some rough running, but maybe I'll pick up a couple miles per gallon too. Who knows? We can hope for anything. But if this video is something that helps you, make sure you hit that like button. I appreciate you taking the time to watch. Hit like, hit subscribe, and I'll see you next time.